So when you were a tour guide, there was a question that came up again and again. You want to recount what that was?
Yeah. Anybody ever die down here?
Why was that such a popular question? I wouldn't think to ask that.
From 1971 to 1976, Dana Cudmore was a tour guide at Howe Caverns, one of the largest caves in the Northeast, where, for whatever reason, the question, "Has anybody ever died down here?" was asked again and again. And the answer, Dana would come to discover, was yes. 2 employees of Howe Caverns collapsed on April 24, 1930, at the same time that a nearby cement quarry detonated 7.5 tons of dynamite to knock 60,000 tons of limestone from the hillside. Cudmore recounts that story in his book, The Cave Electrician's Widow, The Tragedy at Howe Caverns, and Dramatic Courtroom Fight for Justice. It's his 4th book about Howe Caverns and the historic cement and stone quarries of New York's cave country at the northern edge of the Catskills. On today's Catscast, we join Dana Cudmore for a drive through Howe's Cave, New York, a locus for tourism and industry since the mid-1800s.
This episode is supported by Hanford Mills Museum. Explore the power of the past as you watch the water wheel bring a working sawmill to life. Bring a picnic to enjoy by the mill pond. For more information about scheduling a tour or about their 2025 events, visit hanfordmills.org. Catscast is sponsored by the Mountain Eagle, covering Delaware, Greene, and Schoharie counties, including brands for local regions like the Windham Weekly, Schoharie News, and the Catskills Chronicle. For more information, call 518-763-6854 or email mountaineaglenews@gmail.com.
Today's story begins in Cobleskill, New York, where we met up with author and historian Dana Cudmore for a drive through cave country at the northern edge of the Catskills.
I'm Dana Cudmore, and we are just leaving my home in the village of Cobleskill. We're taking a tour of Schoharie County's limestone cave belt. Schoharie County is the northeasternmost point of a cave belt that runs through the United States. It basically starts just a little farther north from where we are and works its way down through Pennsylvania into the Virginias, and then kind of heads west through Kentucky.
So in this area, you have Howe Caverns,
Yep.
you have Howe's Cave with an apostrophe,
Yep.
and you have Howe's Cave without an apostrophe.
Yes.
So I've got an Abbott and Costello question for you. Who's Howe?
Howe is Lester Howe, and he is the man who, if not discovered, was the first to fully explore a cave that was known about but not really, pardon the pun, dug into. He discovered it on May 22nd, 1842 on his neighbor's property, and he bought the property from him the following year. And what's different about the fact that he explored this cave was that he decided to open it as an attraction, and Howe's Cave, that's the Howe apostrophe S, was the 3rd cave in the country that was open to the public. And he ran it as a family business for a number of years, charging anywhere from 50 cents to $1 for people to take the tour by torchlight. And it was an adventure. It was an all-day adventure. People being in the cave for 8 to 10 hours to 12 hours. Now, Howe's Cave is what the State Department of Transportation calls the community that's sprung up around Lester Howe's Cave, and that's without the apostrophe. It's like Glenn's Falls. I'm sure Glenn was someone who had an apostrophe after his name at one point.
Can you recount the story of how Howe discovered the cave?
Sure. The story is the one that's told at Howe Caverns, every day is that he noticed that his cows were moving to a particular spot in the field on hot days. And when he moved up to investigate, he could feel the cool air from the cave coming up from below ground. And the entrance to the cave had been covered by the overgrowth, by brush and shrub, and it was not plainly visible. When he dug a little deeper and peered inside, he, as I said, he found the cave on his neighbor's property and was the first to fully explore the cave.
And you are quite familiar with this history. One reason is that you had a job in the 1970s.
I was a tour guide at Howe Caverns, like hundreds of other young men and women from this area have been. And I worked there for a couple of years in high school, as soon as I turned 16, and completed 4 years of college. It was a great place to work. Mostly younger staff, not unlike a fraternity in some respects.
So we just passed a sign for secret caverns. What's the story there? It seems a little bit more, what's the word? Not homegrown, or a little fun, the branding's a little funkier?
Yeah, they're kitschy.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're always kind of a friendly frat boy type of relationship between Howe Caverns and Secret Caverns. Someone wrote that Howe Caverns was the snooty fraternity in Animal House, and Secret Caverns was the rowdy deltas. I can't think of the names of the fraternities, but that's how he compared the two caves.
Kroger, your Delta Tau Chi name is Pinto.
Why Pinto?
Why not? What's my Delta Tau Chi name?
Well, Howe's Cave became Howe Caverns in 1929 when a corporation opened it pretty much the way you see it today. Work to do that started in 27, and they raised about $500,000 to do the necessary work to install electric lights, to install brick pathways, basically clean up the cave and make it accessible to people that are seeing it today. One of the chief engineers, his name was Roger Mallory, and he distinguished himself in a couple of ways, but he fell in love with the daughter of the woman who ran the boarding house where he was staying, and he and her were married in the cave in 1928. That was the first of the weddings that they count today. For whatever reason, he stopped working for Howe Caverns Incorporated after about 6 months and went up the road and said, I'm going to open my own cave. And that is Secret Caverns. And the name Secret comes from another cave that Lester Howe is said to have discovered and told everyone that it was bigger and better than his first cave. And so Mr. Mallory decided that Secret Caverns was that cave, and Lester had kept the location of the cave secrets, hence the name Secret Caverns. And Howe's Cave, and I get a kick out of this is the real Abbott and Costello line, is Secret Caverns technically has a post address that is in Howe's Cave. So how do you get to Secret Caverns? Well, you go to Howe's Cave. Try explaining that to someone from out of the air. Well, no, I've already been to Howe's Cave.
We pulled off on the side of the road for a view of the Howe Caverns entrance off in the distance, and Dana Cudmore explained the underground geology that gives cave country its signature features.
You said you're not a geologist, but can you give a layman's overview of how caverns like these form in a limestone bed?
It's all water erosion.
Uh-huh.
Water seeps underground, and it typically will pocket. And the pockets grow as more water comes below ground and eats away at the limestone. Eventually, a underground stream will come through and connect all of these different pockets. And that's why when you're in a cave and you look up and something just seems to go straight up, they're called domes. They're just these circular pockets that go straight up, and you think, how could water erosion work against gravity? Well, it didn't. It formed there, and the stream came through eventually and connected all these little pockets of water.
And just dug it deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the limestone there's a couple of different formations. Notably, the caves here are formed in what is called the Manlius Formation, and that's named for Manlius, New York. And that is kind of the standard of how limestone formations are named, is by the pockets where they're most prevalent and discovered.
Getting back to the story behind Cudmore's most recent book, I asked,
So when you were a tour guide, there was a question that came up again and again. You want to recount what that was?
Yeah. Anybody ever die down here?
Why was that such a popular question? I wouldn't think to ask that.
I think it was mostly young kids who asked, and they were trying to be funny. Or, if someone asked it seriously, I'd give them a serious response. But if it was some young kid trying to be funny, I'd say, oh yeah, all the time. Just a couple last week. And at the time, I honestly didn't know, but I did in fact ask the other guides. And the story that I heard was that 2 men were asphyxiated in the cave in 1930 following a blast at the Howe Cave cement works.
for as long as Howe's Cave has drawn tourists, it's also drawn industry, quarrying limestone for products like cement. Today, Cobleskill Stone Products leases about 350 acres of the quarry for the production of aggregate or crushed stone. In years past, the quarry was exploited by a variety of companies, including, in the 1960s, Penn-Dixie Cement Company, and before that, the North American Cement Company, which, on April 24, 1930, detonated that fateful blast, which we'll hear more about in a moment. Off to the side of the quarry, overgrown by weeds and seemingly forgotten by time, is a large monument, a trophy actually, that reads Portland Cement Association Safety Trophy, awarded to North American Cement Corporation, Howe's Cave, New York plant, for a perfect safety record in 1930. Wait a minute, a perfect safety trophy the same year as the deadly blast? As Cudmore explains it, this was a PR stunt and a buttress for the cement company's legal defense in the case of asphyxiation in nearby Howe Caverns.
This is a complete fraud, by the way. This was given to the North American Cement Company in 1930. It's a safety award. And that's the year that the two men were asphyxiated in the cave.
When speculation was swirling as to whether they were responsible for the deaths.
Right. And a good lawyer would argue, well, the accident didn't take place on the quarry property, it took place on cave property.
And so this actual monument was created in 1930.
Yeah. It was the annual award of the Portland Cement Organization.
Adjacent to the monument, Dana squeezes us through a narrow gap in a chain-link fence.
Well, what are we breaking into here, Dana?
Well, this is the original entrance to Howe's Cave.
Oh, wow. This is where Howe discovered it?
This is where Howe discovered it, yeah. This is the start of the Howe's Cave story.
Wow.
The building next to us is the third hotel at the site to welcome visitors. And they used to enter the cave through the basement.
Near the entrance to Howe's Cave, we were met by a drift of cool air.
Oh, can you feel the cool air?
From the same source that beckoned those cows centuries ago.
I came across an old account from 1845, and all of the people who wrote about the cave talked about how funny it was to prepare for the cave because they were given old clothes with dried mud on them here and there and boots, and they all looked like beggars. And this one talked about there being a bar in the cave. This first room that you enter is called the lecture room. It's maybe 8 feet by 10 feet, good sized room. You can walk through it, but then it opens up into maybe something 20 by 30 feet. So you're in a good sized room. And at the end of it, there was a bar where you could, get ready for the tour with a good stiff drink.
Everything was better back then, huh?
Yeah.
Who owns this property?
Technically, the Cave House Museum does. We've got about a quarter-mile stretch given to us by, it's Callanan Industries, who owns the property. Cobleskill Stone is leasing the mineral rights.
And so you have very limited hours?
Yeah, we're only open, I think it's the second Sunday of June, July, August, and September.
Okay.
Inside the eerily quiet Cave House Museum, in the building that once served as a hotel for Howe's Cave tourists, Dana Cudmore posed for a picture with a life-sized wax figure of Lester Howe. And then I finally got to ask about the tragedy that struck those two men working in the caverns.
Do you want to, Dana, tell me this a synopsis of what happened on April 24th,
Sure.
1930?
Sure. So we've seen the connection between the cave and Howe Caverns, and have to remember that during 1928 the quarry was still operating. Men were underground, stringing lights. They were constructing the paths for Howe Caverns, railings, what have you. They were working underground. The quarry was still operating. The quarry was still blasting limestone from the hillside to make cement. The process of blasting is this. First, they create a level, pure stone base. They do that by removing what they call the overburden. And to you and I, the overburden is the grass, the leaves, the trees, what have you. And they strip it down to just the stone. And it's pretty close to the surface here in the cave country. They cleared an area that was 150 feet long. It was 50 feet wide, and then they drilled down 90 feet. They drilled 20 holes, 2 rows of 10. And part of that, they hit a pocket, meaning they drilled down and they lost the drill. So they hit an empty space. They filled it up with they call it bagging it, and that just dropped a bag made for that process, filled with cement, with clay, what have you, to keep in the explosive force of the charge. So they loaded up these 20 holes of dynamite. By the time they finished that, they had put in 7.5 tons of dynamite. That was called a typical shot. It wasn't any larger than they had been doing. And they set it all off about simultaneously, and it took down 60,000 tons of limestone. It shot it, some of it was shot as far as 300, 400 feet. So that was the blast that morning on April 24th, 1930. Owen Wallace, who was the chief electrician for Howe Caverns, and his cousin by marriage, John Sagendorf, entered the cave, a typical day. He was there to change lights, and they never returned. A man was sent down to find why they were so long, and he barely made it out alive himself. He fell out of the elevator and mentioned something about poisonous fumes in the cave, and that started the rescue effort, and it was pandemonium up there. But they were working on them under a Bureau of Mines proclamation that they had to keep trying for 6 hours. So when the men were finally brought up out of the cave, and this was between noon and 1 o'clock, they were probably dead at that time. They'd been asphyxiated, possibly by the fumes from the dynamite blast. But what's intriguing is you talk to people who work with dynamite, they will tell you there's nothing in the fumes that are given off that would disable a man so quickly that he couldn't get out of the cave and back to the surface. So it was kind of a mystery. And that set the stage for the lawsuits that followed. And a good part of the book, The Cave Electrician's Widow, is the actual testimony from the lawsuit of Martha Wallace, who's the cave electrician's widow. They'd been married not much longer than a year and had moved from Saranac Lake here to Howe Caverns.
And so they were electrifying the caves for tourists.
Correct, right. This was the time that the caves had been electric. So Owen Wallace, the electrician, he had a pretty good job. There are 21 miles of cable in Howe Caverns. And at the time I worked there, they said there were about 1,700 light bulbs. So it's about that. So, and they're under stressful conditions being in the cave, 52 degrees, constant dripping of water. So Owen probably had his work cut out for him.
Was there any resolution as to what the fumes were that actually killed them?
The cave was declared safe to re-enter the following afternoon, and the district attorney's investigation began right after that. And his chemists and experts decided that it was carbon dioxide that killed the two men. And the quarry's attorney in their defense sought to prove that it wasn't carbon dioxide from the blast. It was perhaps naturally occurring carbon dioxide that somehow may have been loosened by the blast, but that was on the quarry property that blast occurred, and they were perfectly entitled to work the quarry. And the quarry's attorney does a little obfuscating and tries to confuse the jury, and without giving away the final the verdict, you're going to guess right up until the time you get the jury's final decision.
Almost a century later, I asked if blasting still occurs and whether it poses a risk to humans in the caverns.
They blast probably every other week, I'm saying.
And does Howe Caverns stay open during those times?
As far as I know, yes, yeah.
So they're confident that
Yeah.
situation wouldn't happen again?
Yeah, it's a different process, a different type of dynamite, then it's not as strong. It's not even half of what it was then. Yeah, I mean, you saw the size of the hill that they knocked down. That's a big, and they do that now, what they call benches. They take it down maybe 20 or 30 feet at a time, so there's steps nowhere near the cave really anymore.
Are those the only two people who ever died in the cave?
Yep.
It seems like there would be a lot more.
And millions of people have been through the cave. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think that this college job as a tour guide led you on this kind of lifelong path of curiosity?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I was thinking about it just today, and I was thinking, you wanted to be good. You wanted to be a good guide and, give people, a educational and entertaining tour. And, I'd listen to some of the older guides and see what they had to say. And, I didn't specifically go out and research the cave, then in my teens, but, I'd come across something and it just really struck me as amazing. These old photos from 1880, 1890 of the same area I'm walking in. And, caves don't change. If you see a man standing next to, for example, the pipe organ, well, you're standing next to that pipe organ, and it has not changed. Maybe he's got an oil lantern that he's holding, but it's not different. And that just fascinated me. Yeah, the cave really has an amazing history. Pretty remarkable.
Dana Cudmore is the author of The Remarkable Howe Caverns Story, Farming with Dynamite, Underground Empires, and The Cave Electrician's Widow. Available now at purplemountainpress.com. Enter the promo code CATSCAST for 25% off and free shipping through June 30th. Plus, we're giving away one signed copy for free. Click the link in our show notes for a chance to win. CATSCAST, the Catskills podcast, is a production of Silver Hollow Audio. Transcriptions by Jerome Kozlowskis are available at catscast.com, where you can sign up for our newsletter, buy a CatsCast t-shirt, or leave some feedback about the show. Follow us on Instagram at CatsCast. I'm Brett Barry. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.